I was staying in a cabin on the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland in the mountains. One day, we were snowed in, and when you're snowed in up there, you're pretty much stuck. Now, there are plenty of bears and deer up there. We keep salt licks, corn, and all kinds of stuff around, not to hunt, but to just feed them. While I walk by the back window, which is over the underground garage, where we kept snowmobiles and four-wheelers, I see this big brownish thing in the woods, probably 50 feet or so from the cabin, just sitting in the snow. I was shocked because I'd never really seen a bear there, but heard the stories about them being around. So I ran to get my mom to show her, and as we walked back to the window, the damn thing stood up. And I don't mean like a bear. I mean like a big, tall man standing up. It then turned around and walked with a huge stride and took off into the woods. We just stood there shocked. What the hell was that? And my uncle just says, "Oh, that's Squatch. He's kind of a celebrity around here." I don't know if he was just trying to make us feel better by diffusing the situation with a comedic remark, but after that, I never went into those woods alone again. Okay, I just looked up the Goat Man, and now I'm seriously freaked out. When I was a kid, my family used to go camping a lot. We had an RV, and my sister and I would sleep in the top part above the driving compartment. I don't remember what that area is called, but it's higher up and hangs over the driver's seat. One night, when I was about 6 or 7, I woke up because I had to pee. I saw movement out the corner of my eye and looked out the little porthole window. I couldn't see the torso clearly, but I could see the head, arms, and legs. I thought it was a deer at first, standing on its back legs. I remember its head was massive. I always tell people it was a deer head, but reading about Goat Man, it could have been a large goat. Anyway, its limbs were very long and very thin, making it tall enough for its head to be about eye level with me in the trailer. I remember its arms were out to the sides and bent up at the elbow, its wrists limp and its hands kind of flapping slowly, both of them twitchy and out of sync with each other, as if it was upset by something. For some reason, it's the hands that stick out to me the most now, and the hands that terrified me then. Perhaps because when I noticed them is when I realized that it wasn't a deer. It was just staring at the RV for several seconds. Then it pulled its arms back against its chest, lowered its head, hunched its back, and limped away. No one else saw it, so of course the family wrote it off as a nightmare. But now I feel like I really need to go do some research on the Goat Man. In the 80s, my cousin was on a camping trip with his wife. It wasn't a busy day for camping, and according to my cousin, the ranger told them that they were the only ones camping there that night. Anyways, so it's getting late, and my cousin said he spots something across the lake. He thought it was a bear standing, so he grabs his binoculars. It was sort of like a bear, but it was standing up on its legs. He said it wasn't a bear because it had a face like a 70-year-old man, and the fur was much longer than a bear's. He thought maybe it was someone in a suit. It disappeared quickly, whatever it was. He was spooked and wanted to leave the park immediately. His wife thought he was being ridiculous though, and just having an overactive imagination. She had brought a shotgun and insisted that they'd be fine if anything happened. So that night, everything is going fine, until my cousin is awakened by footsteps. His wife is still asleep, but he doesn't want to wake her. He just tries to keep as still and quiet as possible. A figure approaches the tent, My cousin said he was positioned so that his head was on the corner of the tent. This figure leans down and gently presses its hands around the corner of the tent, so the figure is basically putting its hands around my cousin's head. I don't remember how long he said this lasted, but this figure eventually left. My cousin said it smelled like mechanical things, like someone working on a car, although we heard no car. The next morning, everything at the campsite was untouched. No problems at all. There wasn't any evidence that anyone had been there. He eventually went and researched the area and discovered that their camping area is supposedly a hotspot for Bigfoots and such. He firmly believes that he saw some kind of Sasquatch. I'm not sure if I believe him. If anything, I always thought it was just a person messing with him. This story was told to me by a former coworker, a female, early 30s now. It happened to her when she was a kid, 20-something years ago. She was playing hide and seek with a group of friends in 80 Barnes Park on 40th Street, Miami, when while hiding alone under a bush in a heavily forested part of the park, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She turned and saw a 6-foot dinosaur reaching out to her with very sharp claws. She immediately scurried out from under the bush and bolted towards her party. When she told them the story, a group of adults went looking, but they found nothing. After a few weeks of terrible nightmares, her family told her that a man dressed up like a dinosaur was caught by the police and arrested for a slew of kidnappings. She told me that this calmed her down, and the nightmare stopped. She believed the story, and that was that. I asked her if, remembering back to what she saw, she really believed that it was a guy in a costume. She said it looked real, and not like any costume she had ever seen. She also described it as like no dinosaur she'd ever seen in a movie or a science book, but more like a reptile man. This woman has no interest in the topics of cryptids or UFOs. She told us this one day at work when she heard a group of us chit-chatting about aliens and such. It was interesting to watch the hairs on the back of her hands stand up as she told the story, and she actually visibly started shaking. Obviously no proof or anything, plus the area is now heavily populated, but I thought you might like to hear the story nonetheless. I was roughly 8, walking my dog around the block in the suburb of New York I grew up in. I was walking past a house which had big hedges on the house side of their chain link fence. Hedges that grew through the fence and had maybe 6 inches of thick greenery, starting maybe 2.5 feet above the ground. My dog was acting weird, and when I investigated, I saw something lying in the gap. It was definitely a living thing. I just didn't know what it was. It was maybe 6 or 7 feet long, with its hind legs brought tightly up to its chest, mostly covered in fur, maybe 3 inches long that was very clean, but not all lying uniform on its body. It looked like it had been recently messed up by something. Its body was broad enough to be intersecting the hedges above it while lying on its side. It had stripes running down the length of its body. It made me think of one of those big anteaters, but those things don't live in the suburbs, and its head and limbs were all wrong. The limbs were long and fairly thick, and I got the impression it wasn't quadruple because its front limbs and back legs looked so different. The hands and feet were very big, but the hands were broad with many long digits, and the feet long and narrow with some pretty mean looking claws, which put it in my child's mind that this thing walked on 2 legs. I'm a biologist, and I thought a lot about this encounter, going over it again and again in my head. It was broad daylight. I was not sleepy or tired or anything. I recognized that this thing was wrong. I could see it breathing, or at least its chest expanding and contracting, but I couldn't see a mouth or nose on it, and its head was right there, and big, and weird as fuck. It was lying on its side, and half its head was sort of dug into the grass. I could see two eyes, but one of them looked like it was in the wrong place, substantially lower than the other one, and placed close to the edge of what I could see, so probably a little ways away from the middle of its face. I wasn't grossed out. I was curious and frightened. I looked it right in the eye that was where it should have been, which I realize sounds idiotic, but I guess it was just my inclination to look at the thing that was most correct about it. The eyes were both pretty big, but not the same size, and they didn't have any visible irises or anything. They were 99% black, and had little flecks of color around the edges. I thought it was looking around because I could see the surface of the eye sort of ondulating, I guess. I have no idea how to describe what it was doing. I got the feeling that it was studying me as intently as I was it, but I have absolutely no fucking idea. I was a child, and your guess is as good as mine. I want to say I think it was intelligent, but suggesting that based only off of what I actually saw is preposterous. And yet, here I am, with the overwhelming feeling that it was intelligent. The rest of its face, which also had fur, but was much shorter than the rest, had no recognizable features. It had things on it, but they weren't like anything I had any frame of reference for. Patches of different looking skin, a couple spiny projections, some of what in retrospect may have been ears of a sort, regularly spaced membranes around the whole face I could see, with an out of pattern one on the back of its head. I spent a not insignificant amount of time staring at this thing, enough time that my mom questioned me when I got back home. Suffice to say, I was, and still am, mystified by this thing. I know I keep saying this, but it just looks wrong. After looking at it for probably 30 minutes, I kept walking with my dog, who incidentally I had tied to a signpost a little down the street because she wouldn't stop whining. About 10 minutes of walking later, I decided that I wanted another look, so I turned around and went back, and it was gone. The area it was lying had the grass all matted down and wet and oily looking, with some hair in the fence and hedge, and my dog wouldn't go anywhere near the spot. When I got home, I told my mom about it, and she told me that it was probably a sick dog, and scolded me for taking so long. I know I was a child, but even children know that being sick doesn't do that to a dog. Besides, this would have been by far the largest dog I had ever seen. My mom remembers me telling her about it right after. It wasn't a dream. I know that. I know it happened. It is very difficult for me to reconcile the experience with who I am. When it comes down to it, the only thing I really know about this encounter is that it happened. I can't make myself forget. Telling this story in real life makes me start tearing up, because I know how it sounds, and I know I'll probably never get a satisfactory answer, so I almost never bring it up, even with the friends I know well enough to be pretty sure they wouldn't mock or denigrate me. I'm a scientist, and most of my friends are scientists, and I know how this sounds. I talk to my partner about it occasionally, but never for long. The story makes them too uncomfortable, more because of the way it affects me than anything else.